Hello and welcome to Monday's Granada Reports. We are live with the latest across the northwest.
Hello, thanks for joining us. Here's what's on the programme tonight.
The worst treatment disaster in the history of the NHS finally laid bare. The final report into the infected blood scandal reveals a catalogue of failings. It was not an accident. It could have been avoided, and it was covered up by the NHS and the government.
The health service, the government, the doctors, everyone, they all knew the evidence has to go to the CPS. People have to be held accountable, and someone should go to prison for this.
At long last, after 8 other Prime Ministers, finally an apology. A short time ago, there was this from Rishi Sunak.
I want to make a wholehearted and unequivocal apology for this terrible injustice.
A nursery worker who'd grown to dislike a 9-month-old baby girl in her care is found guilty of her manslaughter. Well, first tonight, how people in our region were affected by the biggest treatment disaster in the history of the NHS, with thousands given infected blood and infected blood products.
They were the lost lives, the patients who died from blood transfusions or treatment that was supposed to save them. Also, those left infected, whose lives were changed forever. Tonight, the man from Southport, whose parents and younger sister died as a result. He tells us he wants to see people go to prison.
Well, today, at long last, there is an apology. It follows a public inquiry that lasted 6 years.
Today's report found a catalogue of failures led to this disaster, one that largely could and should have been avoided. It found it wasn't an accident. Doctors, blood services and successive governments didn't put patient safety first. They were knowingly exposed to unacceptable risks of infection.
On top of that, successive governments refused to admit responsibility. They showed little interest in establishing the truth to save face and expense. The recommendations were the UK government should make a meaningful apology.
There should be a cultural change in the NHS and the civil service. An effort should be made to find any previously unknown victims. A proper compensation scheme should be set up immediately, and there should be a permanent memorial for the victims.
Well, today many people travelled to London to be there when the truth was finally revealed. Mal Barham has this report.
They are the victims of a scandal that we now know could largely have been avoided. 30,000 people infected with HIV and hepatitis C after being given contaminated blood products in the 1970s and 80s. Around 3,000 have since died, thousands more still living with debilitating conditions. So many lives ruined, so many families devastated in what's been called the worst treatment disaster in the history of the NHS.
That disaster was no accident. People put their trust in the NHS and the government and doctors to keep them safe, and that trust was betrayed.
The report also pointed to a cover-up, with evidence deliberately destroyed and successive governments blamed for failing to act in order to save face and expense. Today's report, a seismic moment for the victims and their families, who for decades have fought for the truth.
Today is a momentous day, I think, for all of us. Sometimes we felt like we were shouting into the wind during these 40 years. When we told people, they didn't believe us. They said this wouldn't happen in the UK. But today proves that it can happen in the UK, and it did happen in the UK.
Over the last 6 years, the inquiry's heard from hundreds of witnesses, including politicians, public health officials and doctors, and of course the many, many people infected and affected. Peter Mosman was one of them.
I'd be a fool if I say I didn't want compensated, because I do, because I've lost my job, I've lost everything, my family values, everything is gone.
He contracted hepatitis C after being given blood products to treat his haemophilia, a condition that stops the blood clotting. That product, called Factor VIII, derived from blood plasma, had been hailed a wonder drug.
Factor VIII revolutionised life for the haemophiliac. He could treat himself at home.
But demand was so high in the 1970s, the NHS imported supplies from America. Here, donors were paid for plasma, attracting those desperate for cash.
This is the city's Skid Row, home to many alcoholics and down and outs. Here we found the Highland Donor Centre.
The blood of American sex workers, drug addicts and prison inmates was sent unscreened back to the UK, carrying with it the then deadly HIV and hepatitis C. Today's report, acknowledging those in authority knew of the risks but chose to ignore them.
They've admitted that this should never have happened, that they should have put things in place to make sure that people were not infected with these diseases.
Peter was a tireless campaigner and battled for years to get this public inquiry, but he never lived to see justice. He died 2 years ago.
If I could have him back for one day, it would be today. He fought so hard every day of his life for 30, 35 years for the day like today. And him and so many thousands of people didn't get that justice. They've not seen what we've managed to see today.
Many of the campaigners were in London today to hear the results of the inquiry. Inside Central Hall, they gave a standing ovation to the man who presided over the inquiry for more than 5 years. One of those who travelled to London was Barry Flynn. He and his younger brother were both infected with hepatitis C through haemophilia treatments. His brother also contracted HIV and died aged just 30. He'd also unwittingly infected his wife, who died shortly after.
It won't bring them back, but if lessons can be learned, that's great. And if we can have a proper memorial for them, that would be great. And if we can have some kind of compensation.
Sam Rushby lost his mum, dad and baby sister in the disaster.
Finally, the truth's out. We've been saying it for years. The health service, the government, the doctors, everyone, they all knew. They were all warned that it was infected. And still they carried on. They didn't care. And then they tried to cover it up. And now the truth's out.
And it wasn't just adult victims. 380 children were also infected in the scandal. Many of those were treated at Alderhay Children's Hospital in Liverpool.
Alderhay treated its children almost exclusively with large pool commercial concentrates. Utterly inappropriate. Almost all the children were infected with AIDS.
I can honestly assure now that we take patient safety absolutely as paramount. We only allow safe products into the blood supply chain for people to receive, and that's of paramount concern for everybody that now works in NHS blood and transplant.
Since this inquiry began, another 650 people have lost their lives. These vials are memorial to all those who've died, with one more added every 4 days.
The evidence has to go to the CPS. People have to be held accountable, and someone should go to prison for this.
They wanted the truth and they wanted accountability. Today has gone some way to addressing that. But this isn't a disaster consigned to history. It's a disaster still claiming its victims. And what they now need is actions to follow words. Mel Barham, ITV News.
So many heartbreaking stories. Well, let's cross live to Elaine Wilcox, who is in London for us. Many of those affected have, of course, been there for the day. And tonight, Elaine, they finally heard that apology from the government.
Yes, that's right. The Prime Minister said this was a day of shame for the state. From the civil service to the health service, patients were infected but cruelly told they were being given the best possible treatment. The government has said this is a cover-up on an industrial scale, and the Prime Minister finally apologised.
Today I want to speak directly to the victims and their families, some of whom are with us in the gallery. I want to make a wholehearted and unequivocal apology for this terrible injustice.
Well, I have two of those who have been affected by this, and Andy Burnham as well, who's going to give his reaction to what we've heard. Now, Nicola Leahy, you were a senior manager in the NHS, but infected by a hepatitis C after losing a baby in surgery. Your reaction to that apology?
Well, we've heard it, and it's also documented now all the failings that he actually said, and he repeated what Sir Brian Langstaff said as well about the failings. We've heard it, but now I want action. I want it just words at the moment. We need to see action.
So these were families torn apart, poisoned, contaminated, and they knew this was happening and didn't stop it. A cover-up. So what, when you say action, what do you want to see happen?
Well, one of the things that I think, and when I look at the report now, it's in black and white. I was infected in 1975 and 1980, or both, and they knew about it. So I want people to be held to account. I want people named and shamed.
OK, well, Paula Wakefield, your dad and your uncle died as a result of, they were haemophiliacs and they were given what was supposed to be a wonder drug, but instead they got hepatitis C and HIV. You've got Andy Burnham standing next to you. He was Health Secretary in 2009. What do you want to see happen? You've called for action too.
The most important thing to me is that the truth comes out now and that history is rewritten, and all the lies that we've been told, we've now heard the truth. We knew it all along. It's now there in black and white, for the truth to be told.
Andy, you were Health Secretary, as I've said, in 2009. People were asking for help, raising this issue. And what was your response?
Well, my great friend Paul Goggins, who's no longer with us, asked me to meet two of his constituents, Fred and Eleanor Bates from Wythenshawe, and the Department of Health tried to stop me. And I said, no, I'm meeting them, and I did meet them, and I began to understand the scale of the injustice, and I started to raise it in the Department for Health, saw that institutional resistance, but then carried on looking into it, and finally I got the evidence in 2017.
So that was 8 years later.
I know, but it's the strength of the cover-up. You know, I eventually said in Parliament that this was a criminal cover-up on an industrial scale, and I'm pleased to hear the Prime Minister use those same words today. I mean, it's just wrong that Paula and Nicola have had to wait all of these years for this day to come.
Absolutely, but have you gone back to those civil servants and said to them, why did you lie to me?
Well, certainly I've said today that there needs to be individual accountability. We couldn't get that for the Hillsborough families, but we absolutely should get it for Paula and Nicola. So I am saying there should be consideration now of prosecutions, including potentially corporate prosecutions. I believe there may be a case for corporate manslaughter against Whitehall departments, because they dug in behind this lie for decades, and that put people's lives at risk.
All three of you are backing the calls for a Hillsborough law. At the moment, the government have said they're not backing it. Today was about the apology. Tomorrow is about compensation, and the Prime Minister has said they will pay whatever it takes.
Yeah, big day. OK, Elaine, over in Westminster, thank you.
And more on that coming up in the Network News at 6:30. In other news here today, a nursery worker with 17 years' experience of working with children has been found guilty of the manslaughter of a 9-month-old baby girl.
Genevieve Meehan died after being left face down, swaddled and strapped to a beanbag for more than 90 minutes at Tiny Toes Nursery in Cheadle Hulme.
During her trial, Kate Ruffley had been accused of taking a dislike to Genevieve. She'd even been heard singing Genevieve Go Home and had referred to her as vile.
Today, jurors found her guilty of manslaughter. Live now to Emma Sweeney. Emma, what more can you tell us?
Well, when Genevieve Meehan's parents dropped her off at the Tiny Toes Nursery in Cheadle Hulme 2 years ago, they should have felt safe in the knowledge that their little girl was being cared for. But the 9-month-old, described as bright and mischievous, had barely got a taste of what life is all about before it was tragically cut short. During this 4-week trial, Kate Ruffley insisted that her actions on the 9th of May in 2022 did not result in Genevieve Meehan's death. Instead, she said that it was an unavoidable and a tragic accident. But after just 6 hours of deliberations, the jury in this trial disagreed. CCTV footage from a few days before Genevieve died showed Ruffley calling the trial a stressor, telling her to go home to stop her whinging. Now, Ruffley said this was simply her way of engaging a room full of children, but it only added to the prosecution's argument that she had inexplicably taken against the child. The jury today found that just a few days after this, she committed manslaughter by ill treatment after she tightly swaddled Genevieve Meehan and strapped her face down on a beanbag. There, the child lay for over an hour and a half, her cries and her distress simply ignored, with any interest in her well-being described as fleeting at best. Genevieve Meehan died later that night in hospital. Now, throughout this trial, the infant's family had been present, and at times they wiped tears from their pain-etched faces. The details of the case sometimes simply too much for them to bear. Today, on the steps outside court, Genevieve's father had this to say.
"We will never accept the cruelty of her life being taken away. She had her whole life to live and was loved so dearly by her family. Her life was full of promise and wonder, and it was taken. We will never forgive the callousness of Kate Ruffley's actions. She was entrusted with the care of our daughter, yet she put her own convenience and selfish interests above Genevieve's life. She treated our daughter with cruelty and contempt."
Well, Kate Ruffley gave no reaction as that verdict was returned today in court. Instead, she simply looked straight ahead of her. She's now been remanded in custody and she'll appear here again on Wednesday to be sentenced.
Emma, thank you.
Well, let's move from news to sport now. Manchester City are champions again, Mike.
That's right, an incredible weekend of sport, but there is only one place to start. With the history makers, it's 4 in a row for Manchester City, Premier League champions yet again. And confirmation today, they'll celebrate with their fans with a parade in Manchester on Sunday. But let's see more of yesterday's party, shall we? Chris Hall was at the Etihad.
Come on, City!
Like it! Oh, here we go. City's won 4 in a row!
In terms of numbers, nobody had been better than us. So the records, the goals and points and 4 in a row. I said before in your colleagues, so if I land here tomorrow and I say, okay, the next 7 years, you'll win 6 Premier Leagues. I said, are you crazy? We have done something unbelievable.
They've been coming to the same party for 6 out of the last 7 years, but this coronation feels uniquely City. They are the first club to be Kings of England 4 years in a row.
How are you feeling after that? Elated. Can't wait till next week when we get the double.
I've never in a million years thought I'd ever see us win 4 in a row. And there's no more deserved champions than us. We're just incredible.
Try and explain to us what the atmosphere's been like in there.
Absolutely electric. Amazing.
This won't happen many times in my life, so I'm absolutely buzzing, mate. Come on, City.
I've been a Manchester City fan for 64 years.
You're just bananas for City.
Pardon?
You're just bananas for City. Does the fact that it's 4 in a row mean something special?
Massive, absolutely. Never be done again.
And people used to come up to me when I was a kid, tap me on the head and said, I feel sorry for you, pal, supporting a team like that. So, you know what I'm saying, it means a lot to me.
Don't underestimate the impression that Pep Guardiola has had on this football club. It's absolutely everything for us, everything.
When we won Istanbul, I said, it's over. What I'm doing here, it's over. There's nothing left to think about. Oh, no one has done 4 in a row. Why don't try it? And now I'm feeling it's done. So what next?
Now, in the last hour, Arne Slot has been officially confirmed as Jurgen Klopp's successor at Liverpool. The Dutchman will be head coach rather than manager and will start his new job on June the 1st. Liverpool fans already have a song for their new boss. They were treated to a rendition by Jurgen Klopp yesterday as he bid farewell on an emotional afternoon at Anfield. David Chisnell reports.
Of all and everything about the club, but it's time for me to go, and I will come back as a supporter now, and I'm fine with that. Maybe not for the first game of the season. When starts the season, by the way? Sorry? Oh no, I don't have time then.
As well as success, it's that charisma that's seen Klopp connect, not just with the football club, but the city of Liverpool. Hey! Ahead of kick-off, fans were bracing themselves for an emotional end to King Klopp's reign.
Jurgen is a phenomenon. He's not a manager. He's not like the rest of them. He's yards ahead of him.
I can't believe that he's leaving. I'm absolutely gutted. I can't cope even thinking about it, to be honest.
We heard about our granddad and dad, you know, Paisley, Shankly, and he is our generation's version of that.
I'm old enough to remember Bill Shankly coming here and leaving, and he's on par with that.
Brought us from the bottom to the top,
I want him to stay because I want to stay at the top because we're Liverpool, we're the Reds, we're the best.
Wish him all the best and hopefully he'll come back one day. We love you, Jürgen.
Jürgen has been a really part important in my life. He bring me another level as a manager.
Well, Klopp made the most of every minute of his last day in charge, from his final press conference to embracing the waiting fans.
He's black.
Yeah.
Is it Irish?
No, Scouser.
As an adopted Scouser, Klopp departs the club.
Next, and Tyson Fury says he'll spend time with his family and go to the tip while he considers his future in boxing. He suffered the first defeat of his career in the early hours of Sunday, losing a split points decision to Alexander Usyk in their undisputed world heavyweight title showdown. Fury was roared on in Saudi Arabia and in his hometown of Morecambe too, where fans packed into pubs to watch the fight.
We're going to go home, eat some food, drink a few beers, spend some family time, walk my dog, go to the tip, and me and Frank will talk about what's going to happen in the future.
We've got two great fighters fighting tonight, and the best man won tonight. That's all I can say.
He will come back from that, even though he didn't lose in our eyes, did he? He didn't.
It was devastating that he didn't get the win, but he'll come back and he'll do it again, and we love him anyway. And he puts Morecambe on the map, so we love him for that.
Well, there was disappointment too at the weekend for both Bolton and Crewe, who lost their playoff finals, for Manchester City women, who missed out on the WSL title, and for Cheshire Phoenix in the British Basketball League final. But better news in Rugby League. Wigan Warriors will play Warrington Wolves in the Challenge Cup final at Wembley next month. Wigan thrashed Hull KR 38 points to 6 in the semi-finals. Warrington also emphatic winners in their semi, beating Huddersfield 46-10. St Helens are through to their 4th successive Women's Challenge Cup final after beating York. They'll play Leeds at Wembley. And in Rugby Union, Sale Sharks qualified for the Premiership's playoffs after beating Saracens 20-10 in the final game of their regular season. They'll play Bath in the semis next month. And that's your sport, guys.
Exhausting, Mike. Thank you.
Here's Emma.
Mom, wet wipes, toilet or bin?
Bin. Why?
United Utilities sponsors ITV Granada weather.
Hello there, very good evening to you. Hope you had a great weekend. I don't think there were any complaints weather-wise. Today wasn't quite as good as yesterday, but it certainly will be better than tomorrow and the next few days. And today is the day we celebrate those popular pollinators. So happy World Bee Day to you. Tonight there is the chance of seeing the Aurora Borealis again. Not as strong a signal as it was the other week, and certainly Scotland is very likely to see it. However, for many parts of our region, well, it will be quite clear. I think you'll have to be in the very far north really to stand a chance of seeing it. Mainly between 9 and 10 o'clock this evening. That's when there is the greatest chance of it peaking for us. So taking a look at the next few hours, you can see the skies are mostly clear. It's a mild night, light winds, not an awful lot to say really about it, just a bit of cloud drifting westwards over the tops of the Pennines there. And then we're into tomorrow. Sun's up about 5 in the morning and sets about 9:20 in the evening. And Tuesday will start off fairly well, bright, but it goes downhill quite quickly. You can see we've got these showers pushing across a slightly unusual track, tracking north and westwards there. Some of these could be heavy. There might be a rumble of thunder in there. It's going to feel cooler as well than today. A lot more in the way of cloud around, but light winds, so those showers very slow moving. 18 is only 64 Fahrenheit. Then after that, this is the fly in the ointment. Big question marks over this low pressure system out to the east. We think it's going to create a west-east split across the country. However, some of this could push further westwards. Different models don't quite agree at the moment. So what we're going for right now is on Wednesday to the east, there could be some heavier bursts of rain. To the west, showers and some brighter spells and maybe some rain. The wind increasing on Wednesday and certainly increasing through the Irish Sea on Thursday. Feeling much cooler at this point, mostly dry and cloudy on Friday as high pressure starts to build from the west. Here's your pollen.
Cleaned up well.
United Utilities sponsors ITV Granada weather.
Hello, summer. Piri sponsors ITV Pollen Count.
So then we're still between the tree and grass pollen season. Grass hasn't quite kicked in yet. Trees on the decline and counts are low over the next few days. So some relief for hay fever sufferers. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Emma. Tomorrow we have more on the plans for compensation for those affected by the contaminated blood scandal.
We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.